What's up guys, how's it going? Welcome to the Mantine UI Crash Course. Mantine UI is a React UI framework, and UI framework simply means a package of pre-styled reusable components, hooks, and other utilities. With UI frameworks, you can build your website very easily and quickly because you don't have to build everything from scratch, so it really saves a lot of energy and time. I've also created tutorials on other frameworks like Material and Chakra UI. I'll put the link on the description if you are interested. So why Mantine UI? Mantine UI is filled with tons of reusable components. It is TypeScript based. It also supports all the modern React frameworks. It also provides you other packages other than just components. It has hooks package, form package, dates, notification, carousel, spotlight, and so many others. Basically, it has everything you need to build a simple or a complex website. Since it is a React UI framework, you need to know React before you get started with this. You don't need to be advanced in React, but basic understanding is required. And also, Mantine UI is huge, so I won't be able to go over every single component or hooks or any kind of utility functions. I'm not going to build any kind of solid project or anything useful. I'm going to show you all the basic things with dummy examples. I'm going to show you the basic components, hooks, how to use the documentation website, where to find the actual information, and so on. But if you want me to create something useful, a real solid project with this framework, let me know in the comment section. And also, I'm going to use NEXT.JS for this tutorial, but it also supports other frameworks like Remix, Gatsby, and so on. I'm using NEXT.JS because it's very popular, so most probably you are also going to use it. Also, you need to do some additional work for the setup because NEXT.JS is a server-side framework, but feel free to use whatever you like. Also, I'm not going to use app directory for NEXT.JS because Mantine UI currently doesn't support app directory. They have a plan on adding support for the app directory, but for now, they don't support it. So in the future, please check the documentation about the app directory support. Alright, so I have talked a lot. Before we get started, please consider like this video and subscribe to my channel. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's just go to get started and click on Next.js. You can create a next app with this command. If you don't want to use TypeScript, you can just exclude this option. And Mantine has many different packages. It has the hooks package and the core package. So we're gonna use only these two. We're not interested in these packages, but if you want to install them, you can just click on it and it will generate the installation command. So we're gonna use these two packages. So you can just grab the installation command. I've already installed them, so I will not do that again. And after you have installed all of these packages, you need to do more work. You can just use the default template repository or the minimal template repository, or you can use my repository. I will put the link on the description. You will get the starter code from the starter branch, but I will still show you the setup process. So first, let's just go to the pages directory, and I will rename all these files to JSX. So first, let's just go to the _app.jsx file. I will delete everything. And let's go to the app.js file. Pages, app.js. And let's just copy. And we'll paste it here. So basically, we have imported the Mantine provider from Mantine core package. And then we have wrapped this component by the Mantine provider component. We have also added two prop with normalized CSS and with global styles. This one is for resetting all the default browser styles. And this one is for setting up some global style, which I will show you later in this video. After that, we need to go to the _document.jsx file and let's remove. And let's just go to document file. Let's just copy and paste. Okay, so now we can go to the index.jsx file and let's just remove everything from here. Let's create a component. I will call it whole. And you can see that we don't have any kind of error. So let's test if Mantine is working or not. And I'm just going to import the box component. So box from Mantine /core, and let's add the box component. So this is box, and we have this text. If I inspect this, and let me just zoom it for you. So you can see we have this class name Mantine, and we don't have any styles because box component is just a container without any kind of style. But we don't also have any errors, so Mantine setup is working fine. So this is how you set up Mantine with Next.js. So now that our setup is done, we can explore some of the basic components that Mantine provides us. So the first component that we're going to explore is a typography based component. So let's go to Mantine core, and here you can see all the list of components and they are grouped. So let's just see. So here we have the typography section. So we have a bunch of components, but we are interested in the title component first. So title component is for creating headings. You can create headings from H1 to H6. So let's see that. Let's just import the component and let's use it. So title. This is title. So we have this heading. If I inspect this, H1, you can pass many props to this component. To see all of the available component for each of the component in Mantine, just go to the component page and go to this section, component props. And here you'll see all of the available props and their type and some description. So by default, it was H1. If you want to change the tag, for example, if you want to use H3, then you have to pass a prop, I guess, order. Yes, order. So you can just pass order and you can pass 3. And now we are using the H3 tag. You can also pass something called component prop. With component prop, you can basically change the underneath rendered component. So let me show you what I actually meant. So we are using the title component and it uses H tags by default. But you have a situation like you want to use the styles of heading, but you want to use a P tag. Here's how to do it. So just pass the component prop. And we can pass P here. And now you can see we have all the styles of the heading, but the tag is actually P. So P is actually rendered underneath. You can pass any kind of valid HTML tag name, but you can also pass any kind of custom component here. So this kind of component is also called polymorphic component in Mantine UI, and we're going to explore them later. Now you might ask, what could be the use case of this? Well, there could be many use cases of this. A good example would be using the Next.js link component with Mantine UI, and we will learn about them later in this video. So stay tuned for that. And let's see some other props, like you can align the element by the align prop. So I can just pass align and align to like center. Now the text is at the center. So if you want to change the color of this component, just pass the color prop. And here you can see we have a bunch of colors available. For example, I can just pass pink. And now the text color is pink. Now the color names I had shown you earlier, these ones actually are coming from theme, and we will talk about that in a minute. And these colors also have some variants, and those variants are from 0 to 9. So 0 means very bright or white, and 9 means dark. So for example, we have this red. So this is the default shade of red color. But I can use a different shade. For example, I can pass red.5. Now that's a different shade. I can pass red.9. Now that's a different shade. You can also pass size. for changing the font size. I'm gonna pass 10 pixel. Actually that is too small. I'm gonna pass like 40 pixel. Now it is very big, but if I just scroll down, where's the font size? So you can see the font size is actually 2.5 rem, but we had passed 40 pixels. So basically in style props, if you pass any kind of pixel values, it will be converted automatically to rem. And there is also a function called rem, which we will see. And 1 rem is actually equals to 16 pixels. And you can also change this to something like 10 pixel. But if you do that, it will mess up with the entire Mantine UI theme. And you don't need to pass 40 pixel. You can also pass just a simple number like 40. And that will also just work fine. So basically this is the title component. There is another typography component called text. So let me just show you first. So just go to text. So these are some of the text style that is available. So let's see how we can use them. So let's just import text. And now let's just add the text component. So this is a text component. So just like the title component, it has also some props that you can pass. So component props, you can use the align, you can change the color, then you can use a line clamp. So let me just show you. I will just copy this and I will add some lorem ipsum text. So you can see that text is multi-line. If I use line clamp and if I just pass 2 here, so now you can see that the text is now truncated and it only has 2 lines, maximum 2 lines. Okay, so this is what line clamp does. Then we have transform prop, truncate. Then we also have something called variant. So variant can be 2 things, can be text or can be gradient. By default, it is just text. So let's pass variant. So we can just pass gradient. And you can see there is no actually gradient. But if I just go to the documentation and there is a gradient section, I can just copy this. Basically, we need to pass a gradient prop. I'm not sure if the gradient is applied or not. So I will just increase the size. And by the way, you can also pass some predefined values like XL, LG, XS. And I'll show you what are the values. So if I just use LG, now you can see that the font size is increased, but still is very small. Actually, I'm just gonna apply this gradient to the title component. And you can see the gradient is actually applied, but it is pretty hard to see. So I will change this color to red. And now you can see the gradient more clearly. So let's see what are some other things that is available for the text component. We have seen line clamp. We also have option to inherit styles from the parent. So here is a good example. Then we have a section called the polymorphic component. And then you have span pop, which is just a shorthand for component span. So span will be rendered. Now let's talk about polymorphic component. So just like I've explained it, it just changes the component that is rendered behind the scenes. So here is a good example of that. I can just copy this thing and I will paste it here. I'll just remove these things. I'll just import the button component and remove this left icon. So as you can see, we have a button, but if I just inspect this, an anchor tag has been rendered, but it looks like a button. So if I just remove these props, now it is actually a button tag. And if I add it again, now it is an anchor tag. And now it is an anchor tag. I can also pass href, a valid href like about. Now if I just click on this, it takes me to the about page, and we get the 404 page because the about page doesn't exist. So this is how the polymorphic components actually work. Another good example would be the Next.js link component. They also have an example for React Router DOM, but we want to use the Next.js link component. So this version is for Next.js 12 and below, and this is for Next.js 13 and above. And we're using Next.js 13, so we're going to use this. So I'm just going to import the link component. From next/link. And instead of anchor tag, I can just pass link. And again, if I inspect this, still we have the anchor tag. And I will just create a new page. So about.jsx. And I will create a new component. So now if I just click on this, you can see it took me to the about page without any kind of page refresh. So this means we are actually using the Next.js link component behind the scenes. So this is how you can use the Next.js link component with the Mantine UI button component. We also have another component called anchor, which is basically the link component for Mantine UI. So I can just add another tag, a component. Go to about page, and href will be /about, and is actually an anchor tag. It took me to the about page, but it had a page refresh, so we can use the link component with the component prop, and we can pass link. And now if I click on this, it took me to the about page without any page refresh. And you can also pass styles, for example, like color, red, and you can see the color is red. So this is how you can use Next.js link component with Mantine UI. And you can also create your own polymorphic components with the box component and this create polymorphic component function. So that is actually all about this polymorphic components. Let's talk a little bit about the input components. So I will go to Mantine core. Then here is the input section. So we have this input component, which is also polymorphic. This is the base component for all the custom input components are you seeing. So you probably won't use it. You will probably use any of these. So there are multiple input elements out there like number input, password input, multi-select, and so on. There is also an input component for auto completion. It's pretty simple. You just pass an array of string as data or an array of object as data prop. That's it. And by the way, if you want to learn how to create a real-life auto-completion search engine with real data and server, I have a video about it on my channel. I'll put the link on the description. So these are the basic components that I wanted to show you. Now let's talk about the theming in Mantine UI. So just go to this theming section and theme object. I'll actually zoom it for you. So Mantine theme is basically an object where your application's color, font, spacing, border radius, and other design tokens are stored. Or in simple words, it's a giant object where all of the style information, not the style itself, the information will be stored. For example, when we had used the text component or the title component, we had used this color prop and we had used this kind of values. We had predefined values like red, green, blue, yellow, and so on. And this red color is not actually the default red color for the browser. It's a different shade of red color. And also we were able to change the shade of the color by passing a number. For example, from 0 to 9, we can just pass here 8. And the shade of the color is changed. So you might ask, where are these things are coming from? Well, these things are actually coming from the theme. So all of these colors, the font sizes, the border colors, borders, everything is stored is actually inside this theme object. And in order to see the theme object, you just need to go to this link, default theme. So here is that source code for the default theme that Mantine provides us. Here are all of that information are stored. And this one is actually a TypeScript interface for the Mantine theme. If you don't know TypeScript interfaces, it's just a blueprint of the actual theme object. So here we have properties like color scheme, light and dark. We will actually see how to toggle between two color schemes. Then focus ring styles, cursor type, then color for white and black. Then we have this colors object. Basically, inside this colors object, we will have color names as property, and those will store a tuple, or I should say an array of string, and the length of the string will be 10. So it will have 10 shades of a single color. So I can show you the default colors. Where's that? So default colors. So here you can see we have this object. We have dark, gray, pink, grape, violet, and so on. And all of them are an array of 10 strings, and these are all the shades. And then we have others like font family, line height, font sizes. We had used XS, SM, MD for font sizes. Those values are actually coming from the theme. And also the breakpoints. And here are the heading styles. So everything is just specified inside this theme object. So let's see how we can access this theme inside our code base. The easiest way to access the theme is using a hook called use Mantine theme, I guess. Let me just search for it, use Mantine. There's a hook for getting the actual theme. So let's just import and let's get the theme. Use Mantine theme. And let's just console log. And I will open up the console. So here is our theme object. We have these colors. All the shade of the colors are specified here. Then the font sizes, LG, MD, SM, all the heading styles like font family. Then sizes for the H tags, primary color, radius, and so on. So now let's see how we can actually customize the default theme. So we need to go to the underscore app.jsx file. You need to make sure that this Mantine provider is actually wrapping the component in the app.jsx file. So let me just show you the docs really quickly. So let's just go, where's that? Theme properties, not this one. So here is the usage section. So to customize the theme, pass theme override object to the Mantine provider as the theme prop. So here is the Mantine provider, and we need to create that theme object and pass it as a prop. And the theme override will be deeply merged with the default theme. So if you just pass an empty object to the theme prop, it will not delete the default theme. So let me just show you really quickly. And let's just pass a theme. And that will be an object. So I want to change the default color scheme of the application. So I can just pass a color scheme property. And I can just pass dark or light. I will pass dark. And now you can see the theme is now dark. If I refresh, the theme stays the same. I can also change the colors. I will just copy this. So there's no deep blue color in the default theme, so I will add that here. So now if I just open up the console, if I just expand this object and go to colors, and here is the deep blue colors. Okay. So this is how you actually change the default theme in Mantine UI. So basically you just need to maintain this theme structure and you will be good to go. Okay, so now let's talk about some other things in the theme. So let's talk about some default props. So you can also change the default props of component. For example, you can change the color and the size of the button element. So let's test that out here. So we're gonna add another property, I guess components, and we're gonna add a button prop, and we're gonna add default props, and size will be LG, and color will be teal. Alright, so if I go to the index.js, we have this button component, but we didn't specify any colors or size in the component. By default now it looks like this, and without the default props it looks like this. Okay, so this is how you can actually change the default props of component. And one other concept I want to clear, that this Mantine provider is like a context provider in React, where you create some kind of global state and you can access those global state values from any children component of that provider. So whatever styles or whatever change we're going to apply to the theme, those changes will be applied to the children's of this provider. If you put something out of the provider, then those styles will not be applied. A great example is in the documentation. So here we have this Mantine provider. So this is the entire like parent and children, and these ones are outside. So we have added the styles to this Mantine provider. So these styles will be applied only to these components because these are the children of this Mantine provider. These components are not affected by these styles because they are not the children of this provider, and that's why we have different styles. So hopefully this concept is now clear. So let's go to the theme function section. So Mantine UI has some basic theme functions that you can use to creating styles. For example, you have these functions called larger than or smaller than. These are useful functions for using breakpoints to make your website more responsive. So here are all the theme functions available. So we have this like focus styles for buttons, larger than. Then you can create some kind of gradient with this function. We have font styles, not sure what is that. Then linear gradient, radial gradient. Then you have this lighten and darken function to increase or decrease the brightness of some colors. Then you also have a function for creating transparent colors, primary shade, primary color, and so on. So these are really useful functions, and we're gonna use these breakpoint related functions later on in this video. Now let's talk about how to change color scheme of the website. So let's just go to this guide section, then dark theme. We have already seen how to change the color scheme manually. We just need to pass this color scheme property, and we need to pass either dark or light as value. But you want to create some kind of switch or some kind of button to toggle between the color schemes. To build some kind of button, we need to go to this color scheme provider section. We need to wrap the Mantine provider with this color scheme provider. We need to create a set and pass there, and also the function to change the value. And then you need to use this hook, use Mantine color scheme, which will give you the state of the color scheme and also the function to change that. And you need to use some kind of button to toggle between the color scheme. So let's build something like that. So let's just import color scheme provider. And also let's just import this useState hook. And let's just create the state. Actually, I'm just going to copy some code. And I will remove this TypeScript generics. So we have this state, and we have this function toggle color scheme. Actually, I'm going to add some modification. I don't want to expect an argument. And I will remove this. So if the current color scheme is dark, we're going to change it to light. Otherwise, we're going to keep it dark. And now we need to wrap the Mantine provider with this color scheme provider. And we need to pass some props. We need to pass color scheme, and we need to pass the toggle color scheme, I should remove this color scheme property. And now we'll just import the hook, use Mantine color scheme, and let's call the hook use Mantine color scheme. It will give you two value, color scheme and toggle color scheme. And let's just create a new button, change color scheme, and let's add a event listener. And we can also print out the current color scheme, subtitle, color scheme. And you can see the current color scheme is printed out. Let's click on it. And you can see that the color scheme is not changing. I've done something wrong. Okay, so I need to add the color scheme property. I removed it previously, so I will add it again. And the value will be this color scheme state. Okay, so let's click on it. And you can see that the color scheme is changing. But there's a problem. If I refresh, you can see we are again with the light theme, because our application doesn't know what was the previous color scheme was. So what you can do to fix this issue is you can store the color scheme value to the local storage, so that when you will refresh the page, your application will detect if the user was preferring a different color scheme. If the user is preferring different color scheme, then your application will be updated to that color scheme. And you can do that pretty easily with use local storage hook. And here is the basic code for that. Pretty simple, but that will also create a problem which is also known as FART. And FART means flash up inaccurate colors theme. But what does that even mean? So in the dock, the color scheme is dark mode. If I refresh, first you see the light mode and then you see the dark mode. But why it is happening? The documentation page is actually statically generated. So when Next.js will build your application, it will have no idea if user is preferring a different color scheme. So that is actually a problem. So Next.js will build the entire website, the entire page with the light color scheme or the default color scheme. And this is how basically static site generation works. So if you want to have a static website or static page and you don't care about this flashing issue or the FART issue, you can just ignore this thing. But if you are using server-side rendering and you care about this issue, then you can go to this section, detect user preferred color scheme. Then there is also a solution for that. Go to this save color scheme in cookie section. So you just need to go to this underscore app.jsx file. You need to add this get initial props function, and this function will only run on the server. And on the server, you will get access to cookies. So what you need to do is you need to store the color scheme value in your browser cookie, and your server will have access to that. And then we will pass this value to the page component as props. So this page props, and the color scheme, the state value will be props.colorscheme, the value that the user was preferring. And then Next.js will build the page on server side using the preferred color scheme before sending to the client. And since the page will be already built with the preferred color scheme, the user preferred color scheme, there will be no flashing issue. Now, this is pretty simple stuff. You can just literally copy paste the code in your application. So that's why I have just explained the code. And if you have some confusion between the client-side rendering, server-side rendering, I've already created videos about that. You can check that out. And also you can ask me questions in the comment section. Now that we have learned about color schemes in Mantine UI, it's a pretty good time to talk about custom styling. And there are few different ways you can add custom styles to the component. But before them, let me show you 3 functions for units. All Mantine components use rem units to apply size styles, and we have seen this before. For example, if I just inspect this and just click on this button here, so you can see that the font size is 1.125 rem. And 1 rem is considered as 16 pixels. M is actually used for theme.breakpoints, which are props like this. And if you use numbers, then those values will be used as pixels, but they will be converted behind the scenes to rem. So here is a good example. So here is a color swatch component, and we have passed this size to 32. Mantine UI will take this as a pixel value and convert this to a rem value behind the scene. So 1 rem is equals to 16 pixels, so 32 pixel will be equals to 2 rem. And the functions that are used for this conversion is also available for us to use. And those functions are just rem, m, and pixels, which you can import from Mantine core, and we will also use them. If you use the rem or m function and pass a number, then it will be used as a pixel and converted to rem like this. You can also pass just string literals, for example 16 pixel as string, and it is also converted to 1 rem, and other values will be returned as it is. The reverse is also possible using the pixel function. So these are the rem, m, and pixel functions. Now let's really see how we can customize the styles of our components. There are few ways of doing it. So here are all the options. And the easiest option is the style props. And we have actually already used it. So what is style props? It's just a props that is related to some kind of style. And here are all of the supported style props are available. So you just need to use this column values. This one is actually the prop. The middle column is actually related to the CSS property. And the rightmost column is actually a section of a theme where the style props are actually inheriting the styles. So for example, we can use this empty prop, which stands for margin top. I will just close the div tool, and I can pass empty. I can pass 30. And now you can see we have this margin. If I inspect, I'll move it to the bottom. So here you can see that we have some margin. And if I just show you the value, margin top, the margin top value is actually a rem. But we had passed the 30 as number, and behind the scenes, Mantine UI has converted to rem. And this empty style prop is actually inheriting from theme.spacing. And if I show you the theme object, the interface, so let's go to spacing. Where is that? So here we have the spacing. You can pass these values or just a string value. So I can also pass a string like mg or lgis. And now we have margin, but different. I can also pass a string value 50 pixel. And now you can see we have margin top of 50 pixels. But in this case, you can see that the value is not converted into rem because we have passed a string. It only works if you pass a number. So these are the style props available. Let's see what are other things available. So you can also pass responsive styles, which I will also show you later in this video. So yeah, that's it for the style props. Let's talk about SX prop, which is also pretty easy to use. So all Mantine components support SX prop, And with SXProp, you can pass any kind of custom CSS styles. So let's see how we can use it. So I can just pass an SXProp. And the SXProp needs to be an object or a function. I can pass a background color. And the background color maybe like teal. And color maybe white. So you can see the styles has been added to this title component. But one thing you should notice that we had used teal, but it is actually using the default teal value of the browser. It is not using the teal color shades from the theme. If you want to use any kind of theme value, you can pass a function inside the SXProp. So I will pass a function here, and theme will be the parameter. So theme. And now I will have access to the color. So theme dot colors dot teal, and it will be an array, so we need to specify what shade we want. I will pass 9, for example, or maybe 8. Now we have a different shade of teal color, and this is the hex value. You can also add pseudo selectors. For example, if you want to change the hover, this is the way you can do it. We just need to pass a string literal as a property name, then give the ampersand sign and colon hover, or whatever pseudo selector you want to use. I want to change the background color with a different shade of teal. So I will pass 4 as the shade number. So now if I hover over the title, you can see that the hover style is working. You can also select a nested child. For example, I want to select this change color scheme button from the box component. So I will add a SXProp, and I will select a class name. So I will add ampersand sign, and then you can pass any kind of CSS selector like P or H1. I'm going to use a class name, so dot title. And I want to add some margin. Oops, I need to add a colon here. And margin top actually, of 50 pixels or 40 pixels. There's no change, but if I remove this empty prop and add a class name, title, and now you can see we have this margin top of 40 pixels. But if you want to use rem as value, then you can use the rem function. So I'm just gonna import rem, and I will just remove the string entirely and call the rem function, and I will pass 40. And now the value is actually 2.5 rem, but the margin is still the same. So this is how you can add a custom style using SXProp. Now let's talk about create styles. So all Mantine components are built with emotion-based CSS in JS library, and they're recommending this create styles function if you want to share the styles to different components. You should use the SXProp if you want to change styles for a single component. So let's see how we can actually use this create styles function. So we'll copy this, and let's just import, and let's just remove this console log, and let's just call this create styles function. So use styles. So create styles. This create styles function takes an object as an argument, which will actually store the styles. Or you can also pass a function, and that function should return an object, and that object should store the styles. And this function will actually return you an hook called useStyles. So let's add some styles. You cannot just simply add some styles here. You need to specify some class names. For example, I can specify a parent as a class name, and that will be an object. and this will actually store the styles. So for example, I want to change the background color. So background violet, and the color will be white. Height will be 100 view height. So let's call this useStyles hook. So useStyles, it will return you an object. So const, and oops, not constant, const. And inside this object, we have a property called class name. Sorry, classes, which is also an object. And this object property names are going to be the classes name you have specified here. So it will be better if I just show it to you in the console. So console log classes, and if I go to the console, here you can see that we have this object, and the property name is the class name that we have specified, and the value is actually a unique class name in order to avoid a class name collision. And we can attach this class name to any kind of component. So I will destructure that. Parent. And I will add it here. Class name. Parent. And you can see we have this violet color as background, and the height is 100 view height. And just like I mentioned, you can also use a function here. So theme, and I can change the background color. The theme dot colors dot violet, and I'm gonna use the 7 shade. And we have this different shade of color as background. And you can also select children here. So I can just cut this style, or I can just comment it out. And then I can paste the same thing here. And that should also work fine. Okay, so you can see the style is also applied. But what happens, I want to add some more style to this title element. So I can just add another class, title, and I can add some margin to the left. So margin left will be rem 20, and I will destructure the title class name. And instead of this string title, I'm gonna pass the title variable. And now you can see the margin left style has been added, but this style, this margin top style, has been removed, because if I inspect this, there is no title class in the H1. So how do you refer to a children inside the parent component? That is actually pretty simple to do in Mantine UI. You just need to use this function called getStylesRef. Let's just import that and go to the children style. Here we need to pass a property called ref. We need to call this getStylesRef function, and you just need to give it a name. I will again pass it title. And now we need to go to this parent, and I can just remove this class name. Instead, I will put a template literal. Again, I'll put ampersand sign, then dot, and now we need to call the function. So I'll pass an expression. So getStylesRef. And now we need to pass the same name that we have passed here, which is title. I guess I need to wrap this template literal by a square bracket. Now it should work fine. We still have an error. Oops, I have removed a single quote here. And you can see the magenta value is now working fine. So this is how you can refer to a children element inside a parent class. So let's see what else can we do with createStyles function. So if I just scroll down, we have a section, styles parameter. basically you can change styles based on prop. So let me just show it to you. Actually, I will just go to the about.jsx file and I will import these things. Call the create styles functions. Again, it will take a function. First parameter will be theme, and the second parameter will be an object, and that object I will call it props, and it will return an object. Last name will be button. I want to change the background color, so background, and the background will actually come from theme, so theme dot colors dot red, and the shade number will actually come from the props, so props dot shade. And let's get the hook, use styles, and I will create a custom button component, so const custom button. It will return a button component, so button. Text will be shade number, and the shade number will be props dot shade. And let's get props, and now let's call the hook. And inside this hook we need to pass the props object, and I can just pass shade, props dot shade. So const classes on button, and let's add the class name button. So let's just add our custom button, and let's pass shade. Shade color will be 5. Let's copy, and this time shade will be 9. And you can see we have this 2 button, but their background color is different based on the prop. So this is how you can change the styles based on prop. So let's see what else do we have. Composition and nested selectors, we have talked about this. Then classes merging with CX function. The CX function is actually the CLSX package function. It's a utility for adding and maintaining class names. So for example, if you need to add multiple class names, you can just call this CX function. Or you want to add some class name based on condition, you can do it like this. So we have first added the button class, and then we added class based on some kind of condition. Then we also have media queries. We'll talk about them in a minute. Then we have keyframes section. We have this keyframes function. You can define your animation text inside an object, and then you can just pass it to this animation style. So pretty simple stuff. So now that we have learned about create styles, let's talk about styles API. So with styles API, you can just override the style of the inner element of the component using the class names prop or the styles prop. So a component can have multiple elements, and you can select those individual elements and you can override their styles with the styles API. So I will just open up this slider component page on a new tab. And all of the components have this styles API section, and those nested elements has names. These are the names, and these are the static selector. So basically you can just attach a class name to these elements, and those class names will have styles. So let's see how we can use the styles API. So we're gonna use the slider component. So I'm gonna copy this, and I will paste it here. let's just import slider. So we have this slider component, and we can select the nested element using the class names prop, not the class name. So class names, and that will be an object. So we have root, bar, track. The bar is the filled part of the track. So let's just select the bar. So bar, and let's add a class name like slider dash bar. Actually, I will just comment out these buttons. And let's inspect this. And here is the slider bar, the class name that we have attached. And we can attach stars to this slider bar class. So I'm going to use this use stars hook that we had created. And I will comment out this line because we will get an error. So const use styles classes slider bar. And I will remove that slider bar, and let's add the class name slider bar, background of yellow. So let's see if it works or not. I don't see any change. Okay, so I have mistakenly renamed the classes variable. So I need to wrap this by curly braces. So let's just slide. And now you can see the filled portion is actually yellow background. You can also use styles API with the styles prop. So let me just show you. So styles. And it's gonna be also an object or a function that will return you an object. And here you need to select the element names. So for example, if you want to select the thumb, this circle element, you just need to pass thumb. And now you can add some styles. For example, background to red. And now the background is red. Or I can just select the root element. So root and background color teal. Okay, so you can see the changes. So they are pretty simple. Just go to the component documentation page, go to the styles API, and just look for the element that you want to select and attach class name to that element, or add styles directly with the styles prop. So that's all about the styles API. Let's talk about something called global styles. So with the Mantine theme, you can also pass global styles just like you do in normal CSS. So let's just go to the underscore app.jsx file and then add global styles. And global styles has to be a function, not an object. So it will again take theme as the parameter, and we need to return an object. The property name has to be a valid CSS selector. So I want to select the body tag, and I want to change the background color to blue. I can also add my own class name selector. For example, my title. I want the font weight, just the font size to be 40 pixels, and color to be blue. Not blue, white. So I can go to the about.jsx and add my own tag. For example, h2. This is h2, and attach a class name. My title, and if I just inspect this, so it has the my title class, and the my title class has the styles, font size 40 pixels, and color white. Okay, so this is how you can attach global styles. So that's all about the global styles. There's another section you can see, it's called styled components. So if you want to use the styled component syntax, then you need to install this package emotion/styled, and then you can add styles like styled components. So yeah, these are all the options for adding custom styles in Mantine UI. So now let's talk about how we can make our website responsive with Mantine UI. So let's go to this responsive styles section. So Mantine provides some components that can help you organize responsive styles without writing CSS, and mostly they are not covered in this guide. So the best way they are recommending to make your website responsive by adding styles to the create styles function. So Mantine UI provides you some breakpoints, and those breakpoints are set in munit, and if you want to set your own custom breakpoint, those are also expected to set in munit. The default breakpoints are this. So XS starts from 36, MD starts from 62, LG starts from 75M, and so on. So let's see how we can use media queries in the create styles function. The most simple way to add custom styles is using these kind of functions. So theme.fn has some functions, like I mentioned, smaller than, larger than, and you need to pass these breakpoint names. So let's see how we can use it. So let's go to the about.jsx. I'm gonna delete this slider component. Let's add a button. Actually, I will remove this global styles. So let's add a button. Click me, and let's get a class name, my button. So class name, my button, and let's add the class my button. So let's add a breakpoint, theme.fn.smaller than. So let's pass XS, and let's add styles. So again, background theme dot colors dot violet 8. So as you can see that the background color is now violet if I inspect this, and here we have this breakpoint name. So the XS, we have passed XS, where is that? So we have passed the XS breakpoint, and XS actually starts from 36M. So basically we're saying if the screen size is less than XS or 36M, then we want to add the styles. Otherwise, we want to use the default style. You can also use theme dot larger than. And I'm gonna pass MD. Then I want the background to be red. So if I just increase the size, so now our screen size is more than 62M. That's why we have this red background color. Okay, so this is how you can add a breakpoint here. And also let me just show you what is the return value of this function. So this used as hook will also return you the theme. So let's just call, oops, not from here, here. Okay, so let's just call theme dot fn dot larger than MD. So let's go to the console, and here you can see the text is actually a media query value. So this is actually a media query value, and this is how the responsive styles actually work. Now you might ask, what if I want to pass a custom breakpoint value but I don't want to store that in the theme? So let's see if that works or not. So for example, instead of MD, I want to use the M function right now. So M, I will pass 500. So this M function will convert 500 pixels to the M value. So let's see if that works or not. So now the screen size is 552 pixels, more than 500 pixel. You can see that it has converted 500 to the M value and added the breakpoint. So you can also pass your custom values in these functions. And you can also pass static media queries like this. And then you also have a component called media query. So you can wrap some component by the media query component, and then you can pass a query which is equals to a media query string, and then you can add your own styles. Honestly, I don't like this approach. The media query component actually work with SSR, but if you don't want SSR support, you can go much more cleaner way with the use media query hook. So the use media query hook can give you a true or false value based on the breakpoint that you provide. So let's see how we can use this hook. So I'm just gonna copy this, and I will paste it here. And we need to import the use media query hook. So import from Mantine hooks, use media query. Let's just console log this variable. And it says false because the screen is small. So let's just increase the size. Now you can see that the value is true. So you can render different element based on the screen size. For example, I can render different text based on that value. So large screen is truthy, then text will be large. Otherwise, small screen. So now it says this is small screen, and if I increase the size, it says this is a large screen. Okay. So only use this use media query hook if you don't want SSR support. On the server, this use media query hook will always return you false because this depends on the window object, and that doesn't exist on the server, so it will always return you false. So if you want SSR, then use this media query hook. Then you can also use this media queries in the SX prop like this. It works the same way as create styles function. Okay, so there is another way you can add custom styles is using the style props. So let's go to the responsive styles section. So here you can see that you can attach responsive styles to the style props. So for example, I can use a title component. So this is title. I will just comment them out. And I can change the alignment based on the breakpoint. So for text align, the style prop name is TA. I can just simply pass a center to align the text to the center, but that isn't responsive. To make it responsive, you need to pass an object. And the property name has to be the breakpoint names like SM, LG, and so on. But there's also another breakpoint name which is actually hidden called base, and the base breakpoint actually starts from 0 pixel. So when you add style to the style props, this is actually added to the base breakpoint. So from the start, I want this to be at the center, and after SM, I want this to be at the left, and after MD, I want this to be at the right. So if I just increase the screen size is more than SM, and if I increase more, now the text is on the right side. So basically, this is how you can add responsive styles to the Mantine components. you can also add your custom breakpoints like this. You need to specify in the theme object. So let's go to the app.jsx. So add theme, sorry, not theme, breakpoints. And I will pass a breakpoint called custom, I guess. And the value will be m 200 pixels. And I need to import the m function. And if I just console log the theme, and let's go to breakpoints, you can see we have the custom breakpoints, and that breakpoint actually merged with the existing breakpoints object. It doesn't override the object. Okay, so this is how you can add your own custom breakpoint. Now that we have learned about responsive styles, now it is a good time to talk about more components. So we're going to talk about components for layout. So let's go to Mantine core. Sorry, not guides, Mantine core. So here we have this layout section. I'm not gonna show you every single component. I'm gonna show you the flex, grid, and the app shell component, or maybe the stack component also. So first, let's see the flex component. So the flex component is actually a flex container. So let's just import the flex component, and let's just delete everything from here. So let's add flex. I'm gonna add some button. Actually, I'm just gonna copy this. And for visualization, I'm gonna add a background color to the flex box, gray. The supported props are actually the CSS properties. For example, gap, row gap, align, justify, wrap, direction. So for example, I can change the direction, column. Then I can also like add row reverse. Then justify, for justify content to center, or maybe like space around. I can also change the vertical alignment. I will increase the height to 200 pixels, and then align to center. So basically it supports all the CSS properties as props, and then you can also pass a responsive styles. And then let's see the grid component. The grid component is not really CSS grid. The grid component is actually using Flexbox behind the scenes, but you have the power to make a complex layout. So let's just use that. So I'm gonna delete this. So let's add a grid component. In order to specify children, you need to wrap the children by this grid.column, or you can just store that in a variable. So const grid call, so grid.call, and then grid call 1, and I need to import grid. I can attach some styles, like height will be 100 pixels. Then background will be gray dot 5. Then font size 20 pixels, or maybe like 50 pixels to make it bigger. So I'm just gonna copy this 3 more times. So this will be 2, 3, 4. So by default, the grid component is divided into 12 sections. I believe it is 12. Yeah, so the grid component is actually divided into 12 section or 12 column, and you can specify this grid columns to how much of the space it should take of its container, or how much column it should span of its container. By default, it will take, I guess, the entire width of its container. So let's just inspect this. You can see the flex spaces is actually 100%, but we can change it. So I can add span to 4. And now you can see the flex spaces is now 33.333%, and rest of the space is empty. Why is that? Because other elements are also flex spaces of 100%. So if I want to fill this entire remaining space with the second column, I can just pass span. And 12 minus 4 is 8, so I can pass 8. And now the second column is actually taking the space. You can also add alignment props to these grid columns. So for example, I can add span of 3 and copy this. And to the grid column, I can also use the justify content prop. So justify. And these are actually the flexbox prop. Justify will be center, or maybe a space around. Okay, so basically it just takes all the flexbox prop. For example, you can also use alignment, like align to flex start, stretch, or maybe center, and so on. Then for multiple rows, you just need to make sure that the column sums is more than 12. For example, the first 3 columns span sum is 12. So that's why there is no space on the first row. And that's why when we added a 4th column, we had to put this on a new row. You can also change the orders with the order prop. You can also set offset prop to the grid column component to create gaps in the grid. So for example, I can attach offset. Sorry, not this one. Here, the second column, offset of 2. You can see it has totally messed up the layout. Why is that? The offset prop actually add margin on the left side of the element, so it tried to add margin to the left side of this column, but since it doesn't have any kind of extra space on the first row, that's why it had messed up with the style. So if I just pass 6 here on the span column, now you can see we have the margin without breaking the layout. So that's how the offset property works. Then you can also use the grow prop to expand the columns vertically. Sorry, not vertically, horizontally. So here is the good example. So the last 2 columns is actually taking 4 span. Here is the remaining space, but you can pass a grow prop to the grid container, and that will expand these 2 columns like this. Then you also have the gutter prop, which basically adds a padding to the columns. Then we have seen all these props. You can also make it responsive by adding breakpoint props. So with this prop, you can tell how much the column should expand based on a specific breakpoint. So for example, I will make it 8. So I can just change the prop value of span to 8. Sorry, not 8, 12. Now it is taking the full width, but after the excess breakpoint, I want it to take 6 column space. Excess will be 6. And the grid column span value will be also 12. And on excess, I want 2 column in a row. So I will also need to pass 6. So I will increase the screen size. So now you can see we have 2 column in a single row. And if I decrease again, now it has 1 column per row. Okay. So that's how this responsive breakpoints actually work. Then you have auto-sized columns. So if you put span to auto, it will take all the remaining space. For example, this one, the last column, I can pass the value auto. And now you can see that it has taken all the remaining space. Then you also have fit content for the span prop. It will basically won't increase the size of the column. It will take only the necessary space. And then you can also change the column counts from 12 to 24 or anything you want. Then you can also pass something called negative margins. So yeah, that's all there is for the grid component. And just like I mentioned, it is using the Flexbox behind the scene. But if you really want to use the CSS grid, then you might want to use the simple grid component. So this is actually using CSS grid behind the scenes. There's a problem in the doc actually. It uses CSS grid behind the scenes, but it says that simple grid is a simple Flexbox container. And also again, if I go to the browser support section, it says simple grid uses CSS grid layout. So that's really confusing, but it actually uses CSS grid. I can just prove it to you. I will inspect this. And here you can see it is using actually CSS grid, not Flexbox. So again, it is pretty simple. I don't need to write any extra code here. Then you also have another component called stack. It is actually Flexbox, but for vertical containers. So you can stack children one after another vertically. Now, one thing that stack uses Flexbox cap, and older browsers doesn't support the Flexbox cap. So that's all there is for the stack component. The last component that I want to show you is the app shell component. So what is this app shell component? It's actually a responsive component for your application, which will include the common things like navbar, header, footer, and so on. A good example is this. So most of the application has some kind of header or navbar and also some kind of footer. So with this app shell component, you can just add the component to the navbar for the header, and then you can also specify the breakpoints for when which component should be rendered. So let me just show it to you first. Basically, you want to add the app shell component to the underscore app.jsx file, which will be used for wrapping your entire application. But for this, I'm gonna use it in this about.jsx file. So let's just import the app shell component. And let's just add app shell. And I will wrap everything by this app shell. So now I can specify header. This will actually take a React node as a value, not a component. So I can just pass h1 Mantine h1. And you can see we have this header. Then I can also add footer. Footer. You can also use the footer component. So footer. I'll also import header. So I will wrap this header with header component. And this is added for using semantic tags. Then I can also add a footer. This is footer. And here you can see the footer text. Then for navbar, I can just copy this thing. Navbar. And I will remove this height prop. Okay, so now you can see that we have this navbar, but we don't see the header. And the reason is both the header and the navbar is position fixed. So that's why navbar is taking the entire height and hiding the header element. to fix that, we need to pass the height prop to the header. So height, so 80 pixels. And now you can see the header has a 80 pixel height, and the navbar, where is that? Here is the navbar is below the header, and Mantine UI is calculating the necessary height and the position using the height prop that we had provided to the header. You can see that the top value is equal to 5 rem or 80 pixels. It is actually the value that we had provided, and the height is calculated with the calc function. Okay, so the height property is necessary. But if you just pass age, that doesn't work. And you can also see the available props to this component. Just go to the component props. By the way, this component doesn't have individual doc page. So all of the information you will find here. So for example, the header, we have passed the height prop. You can also pass position values, border or without border, C index, and so on. Then you have a site component, footer, then a navbar, and so on. So let's see what else do we have. So you can add responsive styles. So let me show you this example. So I will open up the div tool. So here, if I just keep decreasing the screen size, you can see the component sizes are changing. And now the site section and the navbar section is collapsed, and we also have this hamburger section. Okay, it can be really useful to make your website responsive. And the way you can achieve this is using this media query component prop, or you can also use that use media query hook. Depends on if you need server-side rendering or not. And then you also have option to change the layout. You just need to pass a layout prop, and the value should be alt. So let's open this on a new tab. So on default layout, the header always on top of the navbar, but this time navbar taking the entire height, also the sidebar, and in the middle you have the header, your content, and the footer. And you also have this hidden prop. With hidden prop, you can just hide all of the element of the app shell and just render the children. So if I just pass hidden, now you can see that it is only rendering the children. You can also pass the hidden breakpoint to the navbar. So here is the navbar component props. You can also pass the hidden values. So if I just pass hidden to the navbar, now the navbar is actually hidden. But you can also specify at which breakpoint you want the navbar to be hidden with this hidden breakpoint prop. In order to this breakpoint to work, you need to make sure that hidden is actually true. So hidden breakpoint, I'm gonna pass SM. You can see the navbar is still hidden, but if I increase the screen size, now you can see the navbar. But if I decrease, now you don't see the navbar. And this prop is also available for this aside component. Okay, so let's see what else do we have. Then you can also use this navbar aside component outside the app shell component. You can also pass a custom scroll bar to the navbar so that you can scroll. Okay. And also these app shell components are actually using semantic tags. So header root element is header, footer's root element is footer, and so on. Okay, so that's all of the components that I wanted to show you. Again, I didn't make anything useful. Also, I used only dummy examples. But I hope you got the basics of Mantine UI, how to use the components, how to read the documentation, and so on. There are a lot of things in Mantine UI, like I haven't touched the Mantine form, Mantine dates, and then other packages like carousel. Then you have drop zone, modal manager, and so on. But if you know how to use the basic components, then using these components shouldn't be a problem to you. And the last thing that I want to go over is the Mantine hooks. So Mantine hooks has a lot of useful hooks. For example, use counter hook, use disclosure hook for implementing some kind of model, then use ID, use list state, use local storage, pagination, then the toggle. Then you have UI and DOM based hooks like click outside, color scheme, using full screen or adding hotkeys. Then also it has use intersection hook based on this browser intersection observer API. Then use clipboard hook, eyedropper. Then you also get a lifecycle hook like use isomorphic effect, force update, and so on. So that's all there is about Mantine UI. I hope this video has helped you. So please consider like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.